Welcome to Simply by Grace, a podcast of Grace Life Ministries with founder and director Dr. Charlie Bing. This podcast and other helpful resources can be found at our website, gracelife.org. Now, here's Dr. Bing.
Well, they say that our plan B is usually God's plan A. And I had a plan A. My plan A was to be in Peru at the invitation of my friend to do some preaching and conferences and help them celebrate the anniversary of their school. And then my back went out, which has happened before. I had to cancel my trip. And so plan B was that someone went in my place and taught. Dr. Marvin Effer went and taught the book of Romans, and a couple other fellows went. And my host, Pablo Torres, who we're speaking to today, also had to deal with a plan B because he got injured and couldn't be at all the meetings. And that's who we're talking to today. Pablo's a missionary. He's a Peruvian, dual citizenship, though, and it's American citizenship, right, Pablo? Or
Yes.
Yeah, Canadian, American and Peruvian citizenship. And it was my pleasure to meet him years ago and be in Peru twice already. I love the country. I love the people. I love his ministry. And I was just really, really sorry I couldn't go. By the way, my back is better, but Pablo's leg is still hurting. So sorry about that. Well, glad you could be with us this morning.
Well, thank you, Charlie. With all the aches and pains, we're still going, right?
Yeah, we're still going.
We missed you dearly over at the 50th anniversary of this training that goes on every year. And since you made your appearance here back in 2018 or somewhere there before pandemic, maybe a couple of years before that, it has been a pleasant addition to see you here. You came back again, and we were counting on you being here for this special edition, but God had a plan A in his mind that it was plan B for us, I guess, like you said. But we appreciate that you sent us a video. People were very much thankful for what you did to let them know what happened. And plus, you sent us a good replacement and the connection with Grace School of Theology as well. That two folks came, and so we had a great time. We missed you, and we are hoping that you will come back for our next edition.
I missed you all too. That's an understatement. I can't tell you how much. The people in Peru are just so warm. Everybody likes to hug.
Yes,
I'm not a big hugger, so that's one thing that stood out to me. And people are just so warm and friendly and hospitable. Let's learn a little bit about you so people know who we're talking to. You grew up in Peru.
Yes.
Tell us, how did you come to know the Lord?
Well, yeah, that is a good question, Charlie. My parents were born again believers, evangelical, serving very much consistently in their early years in marriage. They were working with Bert and Colleen Elliott. He is the older brother of Jim Elliott.
And Jim Elliott, by the way, for some of the younger listeners may not know, was the martyred missionary in Ecuador. And his wife, Elizabeth Elliott, went on to have quite a ministry and write books and so forth. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Bert came to Peru shortly before Jim and his colleagues went to reach the Quechua and the Aucas and the aftermath of it.
Yes.
But anyway, so my parents were working alongside with the Elliots on river boats, traveling up the streams of, some of the jungle rivers here in Peru. And they developed a strong relationship. My mother, was found with, pregnant so that I was going to be born. And my mother would not go to a hospital. So Colleen attended actually my mother when I was born. So we had a connection even before I was born. And sadly, my parents had a major downfall in their marriage. So by the time I was 6, the marriage was so bad that they got a divorce. And the Elliots still kept up, a good eye on me and see what was happening. To make a long story short, they ended up having me in their home in my teens. And that was really the turning point for me. But before that, as you asked about my personal decision to, receive the gospel of the Lord Jesus, during those years, when I didn't have really stable family, a grandmother sent me over to VBS. And reluctantly, I went because I was embarrassed of going to a gathering of kids when they all had their parents and I didn't
Wow.
have mine. So, out of obedience, I went, but grudgingly.
Mm.
But in one of those days, when the teacher was sharing the gospel story, I was very much enamored with a glove that she was wearing as a prop to share the gospel, and I wanted that glove badly. But that actually took the opportunity for her to share what the gospel story was all about. And I already grew up with it, but this was the first time it clicked. I was 9 and I decided to give my life to the Lord. And obviously, it took a while for me to come to a full understanding of what that meant. But nonetheless, it was the turning point. So it was during VBS, gradually going. God had plans, and He had even bigger plans after that.
Well, you got me wondering what that glove was like. It must have been very special. So you kind of felt called to the ministry at some point because you went to Canada to train for ministry.
Yeah, yeah. So, it was neat. I never really felt inclined to pursue ministry. I wanted to study medicine. My desire was always to help people, to assist people.
Mhm.
And being born in the jungle, I got to see a lot of the poorest of the poor, tremendous need. So I wanted to study medicine, but I knew that it was too far up for me. It's a very expensive career and I didn't
Yeah.
have the funds for it.
Yeah.
And so once I started living with the Elliots, there was a team that came from Ontario and New Brunswick to do some work as they were establishing a new church plant. And I became good friends with them. And one of them in particular, he was a police officer. He took a special attention on I don't know, on my youth or a prospect of perhaps having an opportunity to get trained, in a Bible school. No, first he wanted me to come and visit with him in New Brunswick, Canada, but we couldn't really get a tourist visa. And the only way that I could get over was if I come to go to school. So
Mhm.
he gathered those different people and they sponsored me to come over to go to New Brunswick Bible Institute. It's a small school, a great school. It taught me a lot the ways to carry oneself in the sense of discipline. They had a very, very tailored schedule that began at 6 in the morning all the way till 9 or 10 at night when you would go to bed, and they'll
It's good
tell
for
you,
that age group of people, isn't it?
yeah, and I really needed that badly. So when I got there, I began to consider that perhaps God was changing my direction of where should I concentrate my life to. In the process, I kept up, my deep connection with the Elliots, as much as I could through writing, because at the time there was not really much email or text messaging or WhatsApp or Facebook or any of that. So very seldom we would have phone calls, but most of our interaction was over snail mail, as we say. So it was at MBBI in New Brunswick, Canada, when I sensed that God was preparing me for ministry. And the natural thing would be to come back and be with the Elliots as they continued on serving here in Peru.
Yeah. But you ended up in Maryland going to Washington Bible College.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, MBBI had a 3-year program, so I completed that, and they were so gracious to me, not only the family that was hosting me there, but MBBI as well. I think I was the only foreigner in the bunch at the time,
Mm.
and I have a deep gratitude for what that school did to me to the initial stages in my life. It really set the course for what it was about to
Very
come.
good. Yeah.
So MBBI had a partnership or an agreement with Washington Bible College. So I transferred, or they took all of my credits, and I completed my Bachelor of Arts there. So once I completed that, I came back to Peru, and just in time for a ministry that was just kicked off. It's the Elliott Christian School. The namesake is of Jim Elliott and Bert Elliott as well.
Yeah.
So we kicked it off. Bert Elliott, I call him Uncle Bert. He always had a spot for me in which I could pretty much move on and be alongside with him to do ministry. So I arrived here, and I I worked that first year as one of the English teachers here, and the school was beautifully started and with great prospect. It was, if I'm not mistaken, the first Christian school here
Hmm.
in the city of about 1 million.
In
So,
In
but
Trujillo.
that's in
Yeah,
Trujillo.
and
Yeah, it's
Trujillo is north
nine.
of Lima, but is it like the second largest city in Peru?
Yeah, I think it's the second or the third right now, So it's 9 hours or 10 hours if you drive, but only about an hour if you fly.
Yeah.
So, but in the process, I was still connecting with Washington Bible College and its graduate school, Capital Seminary and Graduate School as it is known now.
Right.
So, and then I was offering a scholarship. And I asked Uncle Bert, I said, listen, I got this offer to go back and do a master's. What do you think? Well, one of the regrets that I remember Uncle Bert had was that he wished he would have studied a litro more.
I've
I
heard so
mean,
many people say that, including Billy Graham.
yeah, and this was a fellow, Paperiberto, Uncle Bert. I mean, his heart was so big, and so this was a man of great stature that, I mean, he could teach you loads and loads about who God is and what the love of God is. And for him to give me a nod of yes to go and study, it was huge for me. And he basically told me, Pablo, go as far as you can go.
Hmm.
And with that blessing, I came back to Capital Seminary and Graduate School. And that first year, I met who was going to be my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Sarah.
going to go to pursue a Master's of Divinity. And I was working during the summer doing a maintenance. But then I moved on to work for day camp. And my wife at the time was working there. She was attending Liberty University. But we got to know each other that summer of 97. And then summer of 98, we began our friendship. Summer of 99, we got to know a little more. And finally, we got married in 2000. So we are all Peruvian Americans. We are all Peruvians because of my birthplace, and we are Americans because of our birthplace. So all seven in our family, 4 girls and 1 boy,
Yes.
have dual citizenship because of it. So we have been serving the Lord here since 2002. The same assembly church that commended Bert Elliott and also Jim Elliott in Portland, Oregon, commended us to be and work with them in 2002. So we've been here since.
Yeah, I might mention that Washington Bible College is in the state of Maryland, and it was just literally a few miles from where I lived and grew up. So I went there also, but I didn't go to Capital Bible Seminary. So
Yeah.
very familiar with the territory. I'm glad you got to know Maryland a little bit. Hope you ate some crabs when you were there. So,
Oh, that's awesome. I miss those crabs,
oh
So, I
boy,
mean,
that's
we
my only
consider
real big regret for leaving Maryland is the crabs.
Yeah, we consider ourselves Marylanders because all of my children were born there, but one. Well, the last one was born in China,
Right.
but one of them, one of my 4 girls, was born here in Peru, but the rest were all born in the States. So Maryland is really our home state as we consider, and that is one of our home churches is there, and our commending assembly is in Portland, Oregon.
Now you are with a missionary group called Christian Missions in Many Lands. You're a missionary with them, and we'll
Yes,
put that
sir.
information up if people want to check that out and check you out online. We'll put that in the intro to this interview. But you know what amazes me, Pablo, is that and sometimes actually concerns me is that you're doing so much. Now, so just run down
Uh,
quickly the list of what you're doing. You've got an orphanage, you got a school, you build churches, you take groups from America, you got your regular pastors training. I'm probably leaving things out. You have Bible studies. just run down your menu of activities
Oh,
that I could never keep up with it.
well, it sounds very big and a lot, but by God's grace, we are just one of the minions of the many that are serving. And we look at ourselves as little pawns in this big spectrum of the assembly working together with the saints. And that has really been the only reason we have had our hands in so many plates. When we got commended to come down here and work with Bert and Colleen Elliott, our desire was to do evangelism, discipleship, and church planting. And that is what we were committed to do, primarily through a local church here. So we were glad to get involved in preaching, teaching, evangelism. But slowly, the Lord started expanding more opportunities for ministry, not necessarily because we were looking for it, they were just placed in our lap, if I
Yeah.
could put it that way. So
Maybe
with
you couldn't say no.
well, yeah, that is one of my biggest weaknesses is that I am unable to say no. So through the local church, we do have a home Bible study on a weekly basis, and it's a great bunch of people. Most of them are from a Roman Catholic background, and the church here is basically nourished through about 17 Bible studies scattered throughout the city,
In
and
one
one of
from
them
one
is
church, 17 Bible studies.
right, and one
Wow.
of them is ours. So, and that is on Tuesday night. So I have another fellow that we rotated the teaching on for that. And then now I was asked to be one of the elders in the assembly, and so I do responsibilities for visitation and obviously preaching and teaching and counseling and all of that stuff. That is locally. But locally, we have the Christian school, the Elite Christian School, like I said, started in 95, and I'm on the board of the school. And through the board of the school, we do oversight, planning, and visioning. Our desire is one day perhaps to have a Christian university of some sort. I don't see a Christian university established in Peru yet at this point. There was one of a non denominational group, but they were taking their accreditation out, and I think it just went flat.
Hmm.
So I still have that goal, that dream that one day the Elliott Christian School could become a good Christian university. So in the meantime, we have gained a reputation in the last 3 decades that this is an institution that prepares children for going to college, as well as giving them a strong foundation on biblical principles. We at least strive to get them all to come to the family of God, receive them as as their Lord and Savior. But a lot of them just go through. But at least they were presented with the gospel. So, and that is another one of my responsibilities as one of the board members, to oversee, envision, and carry on with the ministry with the staff of the school.
Yeah.
Back in 2012, that is something that I would say that it just came on our lap, is that since we came back here, we were connected to an orphanage. It's called Hogar de Esperanza, Home of Hope. And that ministry, it really gave us a flavor to taste some of what it means to serve people who are just, you see them abandoned in the streets. In fact, this orphanage was started by a fellow from Kansas, and he saw a young girl as he was jogging one day when he was visiting Peru. She was eating out of a trash bag. And that inspired him to start a ministry, and he partnered with a couple of believers here. So they started Hogar de Esperanza. And when we heard about it, we brought teams. We brought teams to help them, once a year or something. But back in 2012, the founder, through just very sad circumstances, he decided that he was pulling out and he wanted to shut down the ministry. And I understood completely why, because it's so difficult to carry a ministry of that kind here. I mean, the state doesn't help you much. There is a lot of red taping, a lot of corruption, and for the most part, they want to squeeze the most out of you instead of helping you out, take care of these needy people. So we asked him if he would let us. At the time, I had a colleague from Canada. We teamed up and we asked him if he would let us take over it. And he kindly allowed us to take over it. And to make a long story short, since 2012, we have been also on the board of that ministry. And currently we have 17 children. Over 100 kids have gotten adopted in the last 20
Wow,
plus years.
that's great.
And we are praying for more to get adopted this
Well,
year.
yeah, go ahead.
So that is more or less locally what's happening.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a nice facility, a nice property, and and a hundred place. That's great. I know that also you're in a legal struggle because somebody's trying to claim part of that property, and that's something that anybody's listening might pray about, that you
Yeah.
overcome in this very complicated judicial system of yours, that you might prevail in that.
Yeah, I've never been in such a long legal dispute to the point of getting violent. So we have a an ongoing case that it's lasted already for a year and a half, close to two, and still in the preliminary stages.
Hmm.
We are coming close to facing a judge and confronting our neighbor who's this guy is a millionaire, but he still wants more. And so we'll see where this lands.
Well,
We pray in the,
we'll
yeah,
ask listeners to pray with you for the
I appreciate that.
House of Hope Orphanage, and
Yeah.
this would be resolved. Obviously a spiritual battle.
Yes.
Now, if there's somebody listening and says, "Boy, I can't come over and preach and teach, but I could help with children," do you take people from the United States and other places, Canada, that could
Well,
come and help?
of course, in years past, I've had people staying and living with us while they volunteer to serve at the orphanage or even to come and teach the Christian school. And those are two of the big needs locally that we have. We appreciate having native speakers to come and teach English, and that is very much appreciated here by the nationals. If a school has a good number of native speakers teaching the kids English, that is a plus.
Hmm.
So if there is anybody who wants to come for 6 months to a year to do that, I had it in the past. Pre-COVID, we had 3 or 4, but since after COVID, we haven't had that. So we can do that in school as well as if they want to,
Okay,
volunteer and work with the orphanage. Yeah, we can
that's
also
great. I know you also take
place them.
teams. Yeah, you also
Yeah,
take teams
well,
into the
in
jungle,
that,
into the
yeah,
churches.
those are the work that I do outside of the state. I go to the mountains and the jungles. We have built 25 building facilities along the rivers in the jungle in the last 22 years, mostly with teams that have come on short mission trips. I
Yeah.
know a lot of people might have questions about how profitable mission trips are. But I'm telling you, I have benefited and I have thrived on young people that have come through the years and through their week long giving of ministry to the people. We have helped the locals there in a more dignified facility. When I started traveling there, a lot of these little churches had a thatch roof, wooden walls and termite infested. The thatch roof is collapsing. One time I was preaching and the snake just dropped right in front of me because the snake had climbed up trying to catch some of the bats. And as these things are so old and collapsing, and actually that was the reason why I got inspired. I mean,
Wow.
you think of the churches in the States and you know very well, carpeted, AC, nice light, dim lights,
Well, the only similarity
low
is we do
lights,
have some
high
bats in
lights.
the church, batty people.
Well, anyway, so I figured that why not give our people here a more dignified place for worshiping?
Amen.
What is more dignified? I'm not looking at carpets or low lights or highlights. I'm looking for cement floors, brick walls, and tin roof.
Yes.
The first one we built it in 2006. and it's still standing right now. And they have started new works in the area. So imagine that, you give them something so basic and yet more dignified. They get encouraged. I can tell you stories after stories of,
Mm,
of, of folks who have gotten encouraged by a building.
yeah.
I know that people make the building, but when they have something in which they feel more secure and they feel that they are part of the family, my goodness, it,
And
it just
more of an
explodes.
identity too. I'm a big fan of short-term missions. I know it's a controversy in the missions world.
Right.
It changed my life, and I've taken many people on many trips, and it changes their lives every time. And my question
Yeah.
is, did you make your teams? Now, people may not understand it, but Peru on the west side is pretty barren, and then it goes up
Yeah.
into the Andes Mountains, and you cross over the Andes, and then you got tropical jungle, and you take these groups into the jungle. Now, my question is, did you make them eat grubs like you had me eat a grub?
Of course I do. So what I try to do is our labors are very intense, so I have a very comprehensive week-long schedule. We land in Lima, and from Lima we fly over to about an hour flight to the jungle, and then we take about a 3-hour cab ride to the river's edge, and then we go for another 3 hours by boat, and finally you might be in one of the villages, and then we set up camp. We stay in tents so that we stay out of the mosquitoes, so the locals feed us whatever they decide to feed us. We eat. Where you lead me, I will follow, and what you feed me, I will swallow, right? So I tell my teams to be fat. They need to be fat, flexible, adaptable, and teachable. So, and I'm telling you, I don't try to hold back. I try to be very careful as to in what situations I put them in. And typically, if you're sick, you will not really be able to serve well.
Yeah.
But Charlie, in all of these years, God has been good. We eat what the people give us, trusting that God is going to take care of us. So from the time we eat breakfast, so then the rest, some of the team goes out into the community and that's invitations for doing children's work in the afternoon, and then for doing open air at night. The rest of us would go and dig the trenches for setting the foundation of a building. We do that in the morning, in the afternoon. Doctors will take care of the sick.
Hmm.
And then at night, we do our open air, and then we go to sleep. The next day, it's the same thing all over again. So on the last day, I take them to do sightseeing, and during sightseeing, I might take them to the market where you can eat grubs and some other stuff,
I have to
So
admit that the grub actually tasted good. It tasted like grilled bacon fat, but I
that is
was
what
not.
they say.
The turtle soup tasted good. I just didn't like the paw waving at me out of the soup.
Oh,
And
well,
the guinea pig, which is a delicacy there. I know it's
yes,
going to sound strange to people here in America, maybe, but the guinea pig was not impressive. It was very greasy the way they fry the whole thing up. Anyway, if you want some interesting cuisine, Peru though has great cuisine and seafood and ceviche,
indeed.
cevicherías,
Yeah.
fried fish, and all those things. I want to get to the conferences that I missed. I want to find out what I missed. What was being taught, and how did the people respond?
Well, so every year for 2 weeks, it's very intense. We have a number of subjects going from basic theology, to more practical, aspects of theology and shepherding and Christian living. So this year we had, our emphasis was about how the gospel transforms the life of the leader, the pastor, the elder. So we took the book of Romans to be our point of reference, and and from then on we just targeted, how leaders should train their people on just personal issues, how the transforming power of the gospel applies to yourself, how in practice what it does to you. And then we picked up on chapter 12 all the way to chapter 16. So we assigned a lesson for each one of our speakers. That was after the week-long or 2-week-long teaching, on different subjects. And we had a special ceremony because it was the 50th edition of this teaching. So it went great. We had people from all over. We had people from the jungle. We had people from the mountains and the coast.
And other countries
And
too, right?
yeah, there was most of our teachers were from different countries, at this time. We had people from Colombia. We had obviously from the States. We had from Canada, as well as a brother who was from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah. Well, I was supposed to help teaching in the conferences and teaching Romans and other things, but so the response of the people.
Awesome. They're looking forward to next year. And we are already planning tomorrow night. We're going to be sitting down to do an assessment of what things can be improved and perhaps already tailor the material for next year and the schedule and the possibility of teachers. So if you can tell me that you're coming back next year, I'll put you down.
Well, I was going to say privately, but I'll say here publicly that I'll make it a priority. It's the month of January, right?
You're in.
I'll make it a priority. I will keep January clear. God.
Awesome. Sounds great. Sounds super.
Let's talk about what's the state of the gospel in Peru, because I know that you and I believe that God saves us by his grace through faith alone in Christ alone. And yet there's so many different versions of the gospel out there. It gets very confusing for people. I know Peru is a strongly Catholic country, but what about, apart from the Catholic influence, what do you find the gospel situation is in Protestantism and with the people, the leaders you work with?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the more permeating framework in which we are working, because you cannot, I believe, take away the influence of Catholicism to what we are doing, because Catholicism, it's still over 90% of Peru claims to be Catholic. In practice, I would say there is only maybe 50 or 60% who are actually practicing Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
But the sad thing about Catholicism that I think it has also somewhat influenced evangelical Christianity is this idea of mixing up animism and paganism into Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So Catholics are very just easy and don't feel any reservations about some pagan activity in their so-called Christianity. That comes from way back when Peru was conquered by the Spaniards, and
Mm-hmm.
there is evidence that the Spaniards, the only reason they were able to conquer is because they blended the animistic rituals and beliefs of the Inca culture and blended with Roman Catholic views. And I think when you have people that have that background, the tendency is to sort of try to remain in it, even as evangelical Christians. So you are dealing with that, and by God's grace, as you present them a true commitment to be Christ-like and the transforming power that comes through the gospel of grace, then they start to change their habits. There is a large difference here in Latin America, and I would say, well, I don't want to generalize, but here in Peru, evangelicals are truly known by those people who live by the book, as opposed to Catholics who have a more loose way of living, you know. So in that regard, it is good that we see that the model that a true Christian ought to follow, it's really that of being living in the light of Christ and wanting to be more like him. So it might actually frame a little bit this idea of, how to filter a work-based salvation, and that from an entirely a work of grace, and yet being manifested in a life of gratitude for that work of grace in your life. So I don't know if I'm making sense,
No,
but
the
I'm just
Catholics are
trying to
very
give you
works
a whole
oriented.
bunch of,
Yeah. Catholics are
yeah.
work
So
oriented. So you got that challenge coming from that direction. But you work a lot with the Brethren assemblies there, and
yes.
that's a different challenge. I understand that Calvinism has made an influence there and made some inroads there. How's that going? That discussion?
Well, let me tell you, just in this recent conference that we had, I was very glad that our brother Marvin was very bold. I mean, very bold. And I think it shook the foundation of some who might not consider themselves Calvinists, but yet they do espouse those sorts of convictions without being aware of that is precisely what it is.
Yeah.
I'm saying that because Peru has been completely peppered by the Calvinistic theology.
Hmm.
That is what it goes all over. That is the literature, the materials, the easy ones to get a hold of are completely Calvinistic works. I mean, all of the more the more prepared the scholarly minded people have put in display a lot of their books. I've learned that there are two publishing houses that are completely dedicated to, spread Calvinistic authors here in Peru.
Hmm.
So I believe that the majority of people that we are dealing with, most of them would have books and materials from that stance, and therefore when we come with something that they might hear it from the first time, they haven't thought about it because they just feel like the
Yeah.
status quo that is biblical and that's
It's
the
a
only thing
very
that they're
common
willing to get.
situation. People
So
don't know
yeah,
there's other options other than Calvinism if that's all that
yeah.
they hear. I think there's a great need to flood Peru and so many other countries with literature that has a better approach to the gospel and the
I
clearness
think
of the gospel.
you should let me print your books here and then we'll pass it on.
Well, they can get them free on my app. They can get 2 books free on by just using the app or going to the website.
Right, but getting it here is the problem, Charlie. That's why I
I
do
know.
have a whole bunch of your books, and I bring them when I travel back and forth. It's
If somebody listening would pay for
shipping
the
it.
if somebody listening would pay for the freight, I'll send 500 books free simply
Yeah,
by grace.
that would be awesome. I was telling you yesterday, those are some of the books that I always have right handily to give away, and I have, on these last sessions that we've had, I really passed it on. So yeah, if you make it available, that would be great.
What amazes me as I watch the statistics is that when I look at the website and our app, the Spanish speaking world is on fire and so hungry for Bible materials, and it's just exploding. And we can see it in our statistics what countries are accessing this, and Peru is one of them, of course. So there's a great need for literature to be what I would call grace oriented literature to be translated into Spanish, but
Mm.
then getting it there or printing it there. I don't think I have any the books that I print in Spanish are printed in America, but if you can arrange for
Yeah.
Simplemente por gracia or Simply by Grace to be printed in Peru,
Mhm.
we can give you permission to do that, and I've got the international rights for that, though Craig published it. Anyway, we can work that out, and
That would be great.
we can even help finance it. Somebody listening might want to help finance it too. But we give away those, but the agreement is with Kriegel that the books have to be given away free, and that's fine. I love
Right.
it
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the time anyway.
Well,
So,
yeah.
what are some of the greatest needs you see for the ministry there in Peru right now? Just so we can leave people thinking and praying about you and your ministry.
Well, one of the big needs right now, it's really safety. Peru has been under such an umbrella of criminal activity that is just unstoppable. It seems like there is an increment. Peru has had pretty much an open borders policy overall, and sadly, all the good ones, as most people would say here, came on the first wave, and then not so very nice and kind people ended up staying. And you go out in the streets, and people would say that crime has gotten to a level that is unprecedented, and I
And to
think
back that up,
it's
anecdotally, your van was stolen, your electrical
yeah,
wires were stolen for the copper right now,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you've had
So yeah,
other problems with the orphanage.
yeah, there's a lot of vandalism, extortion is just rampant. And now they used to extort people who had businesses. Now they are extorting people who are just selling out on the streets. That was a new way of doing crime that is just reason. So they're coming up with ways. They got very very bold and rude and just cruel as to the way things are done lately. So we are always on the lookout. Like you mentioned, our minivan gotten stolen, never could get it back. By God's grace, He's been always sustaining us. That was a minivan for the orphanage. It was not our personal. So a lot of it, pray for our safety in general, and pray for the needs of the school in the sense of we would like to have. I mean, having said that, safety and crime activity, it's prevalent, and then to ask people to come and help at the orphanage or the school. I don't know how you can marry both of them, but I
Well, you
have
just
had
trust the Lord
teams
sometimes.
always. Like the thing is, I've had teams that have come just 2 weeks ago and not a problem. You just have to decide, that where the Lord leads you, He's gonna protect you.
Mm.
If it is your time, it is your time. But whenever that time comes, make sure that you all together serving Him. So we keep encouraging people in that light. So safety is a huge thing. And another big thing as for me and my family is that as I have somewhat mentioned in passing, a lot of the activities that I learned to be balanced with my family, my marriage, and all of that. We have a great marriage. We're celebrating 25 years in August. My wife has homeschooled my kids. That's her first ministry. And through it, I'm able to do the traveling and the teaching and the preaching and going to the mountains and the jungle. But with all of that, one of the big items for prayer besides their safety is that I personally, as a spouse, I mean, as a husband, as a father, I learned to be balanced, that I don't neglect my family. And I keep on praying that now for close to 25 years of being married, and it continues to be a challenge. It's not easy for me to say no. So pray for that.
Yeah, well, many of us feel that tension in ministry. God calls you to do things, and part of that is to take care of your family, but then there's ministry outside the home. It's just a matter of balance, like you say. So
Right.
we're going to challenge people to pray for the health of the orphanage, that this lawsuit be settled, and that they leave you alone and leave the property alone. We're going to pray for your safety, for your family and
Amen.
teams that go to Peru. Pray for your ministries in the jungle and the influence that you're having, turning people away from Catholicism and Calvinism so that they can find the joy and the freedom in the gospel of grace.
Amen.
And pray for the health of the school and the church. You got your fingers in a lot of different things. And that's one thing that's always concerned me when I read your newsletters. I just wonder how you get it all done. So I'm going to give the information. It's Christian Missions in Many Lands, or CMML.us. And we'll put that
Hmm.
information along with your personal, where they can find you on that website, and they can get in touch with you if they see anything that God is wanting and directing them to do with or for you. Uh, we'd love
That
to,
would be awesome.
we'd love to get more help for you in any way that we can, whether it be financially or personnel or literature. Maybe somebody listening the Lord will touch their heart. Well, Pablo,
Amen.
great to be with you today, and thanks for joining us. Thanks for the
But thank
report.
you.
I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but we'll try it again, Lord willing.
Well, recapping, Charlie, you told me you're coming next January. You're in. and appreciate doing this. And thank you for what you just did in sending a replacement. It worked great. And for the connections with GSOT as well, So God is using you here in Peru and those who are back in the ministry of Grace Life. And we are thankful for it and surely look forward to more opportunities to connect and continue on sharing the gospel of grace right here in Peru where God has called us to serve. So,
Amen. Well, thank you, Pablo, for your time. So what you heard about is you see someone in South America, which is just such a fertile field for the gospel. And Pablo is there as a native Peruvian, taking advantage of that with all of his different ministries. And we want to help him any way that we can. And I hope that listening to this, God maybe is touching your heart to do something. He's spreading the gospel of the grace of God for people who have been held captive by the works of Catholics and the back end works of Calvinism that they feel like they have to prove that they're one of the elect. So it's really almost two of the same thing, but the people who have discovered the freedom of God's grace are rejoicing there in Peru. So if you like what you've heard, comment or like it, share it, subscribe, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the future. So we just want to say thank you, Pablo, and until all here, we'll see you again.
Thank you for listening. For more resources, or to help spread the message of God's life-changing grace, visit our website at gracelife.org. We'd love to hear from you. Send us a message at simplybygrace@gracelife.org. See you next time.